We talk a bit about politics. You spend so much time interviewing politicians.
Mm.
Do you in any way feel that that is a thankless task?
Yes, it is a thankless task part of the time, because they're now so trained not to answer. And also because this lot, the Labour lot, have been in power for so long that they've learned how not to answer the way the Tories had by the time they've been in power for so long. But every now and then, if you do your homework, you can really expose them or force them into a position they didn't want to be, or at least you can let people at home make up their mind. People at home, they hate if politicians don't answer the question. Not answering the question, in our viewers' minds, is worse than giving a wrong answer. Is worse than saying something they don't agree with. At least they'll say, well, that's his view, mine's different. But to dissemble, to blatantly avoid answering the question, people today hate.
Do you think that sort of virus that is virulent through all politicians is why people are so turned off by politics? They just think it's a sham so much, they just don't...
It's worse when you're in government, because in government you've got more to hide or more to explain, and you can't always speak your mind because you've got cabinet collective responsibility. But it's pretty bad for the opposition politicians too, who are terrified of saying anything wrong. I mean, we now live in a world of professional politicians, and so they're careerists, and so they're terrified of saying anything wrong. You know, at least the previous generation of politicians, there were always a number of them, not as many as people would think, but a number, they were prepared to say whatever they wanted, like Alan Clark, because they had lives of their own, so Mrs. Thatcher didn't like what he said on a programme like mine, he would go into something else. And I think this career politician and it's very interesting the position we're in now, because all the forces of media are encouraging an explosion of voices and an anarchic media commentary because of the rise of bloggers and the use of the internet and instant news. You know, it's now 1,000 flowers bloom in terms of commentary and opinion. Used to be the preserve of a very narrow elite. And yet the political parties are still all centralized, control freak, get a message out, keep that message going through everything. So the parties have not adapted to the new media at all, and I think that's something they're going to have to learn. The days of the Blairite spin, Carol Rove was like that with Bush as well. Brown is like, I mean, the ultimate Brown spin is that he's not spinning. That's the biggest spin of all.
I was going to ask you, what do you make of it now? He's had so many bad things happen in succession over the past few months. What do you think bodes for him as we go forward?
I think it bodes very badly for him, because I don't think he knows how to turn it around. I think that's the problem. Gordon Brown is very smart, he has very strong views, but I think he's so set in his ways because he too essentially has been a professional politician for most of his life. A brief period as a journalist, and that's about it. Even then it was a political journalist. That I think he finds it very, I think, you know, the tectonic plates are shifting in the way what people think, how things are done. I think we're at one of these great watersheds in which Mr. Brown will find himself on the wrong end of the watershed. I think it's very difficult for him to change. I think we're moving into a position at an uncertain time. I think the government is in decline. I don't know how it's going to reverse that decline. But there can be a lot of decline in a government that's on the way out. Look at the John Major years.
Yeah.
You know, it took 5 years of a government that clearly was going nowhere before it was actually out of power. Though you felt that time had passed it by, that there was a new age demanding new men and women and new measures. And that's what Blair provided in '97. And I think that I'm beginning to sense that the Brown-Blair years are coming to an end, that it's over. Not tomorrow, not the next day. It could be long, painful and messy, but it's essentially over. But the difference this time compared to the mid-90s is that I don't think anybody, I think even Tories had to admit that as the Major government was in deep decline, that Mr. Blair and Mr. Brown were ready for office, and that they were ready to run the country, and they had the willpower, some of the experience to do it. I don't yet think people feel that about the Tories. I think people feel, yeah, this the Brown-Blair years are coming to an end, but we're not yet sure that the Tories, I would put it in, no one's yet sure the Tories are ready for prime time. So maybe they're slow. No, I could be completely wrong, and Brown could turn the whole thing around tomorrow and he's in for a 4th term. But at the moment, the way I see it, there is an inexorable decline has set in. He doesn't know how to reverse it. But it may suit the Tories to have a longer period because they need a few grey hairs. They need a few lines on their face. They need to flesh out what they really stand for. So that may suit them. But it will make it an interesting time.
Perfect for you.
Perfect for us.
In terms of Brown, do you think there's an element of poetic justice the way it's turned for him? I remember I interviewed Robert Harris a little while ago, and he was talking about Brown wanting power so much and all the things that were going on that were actually damaging the party and the government. And he said, well, it might well turn to ashes in his mouth when he finally got the big job.
It's happened before that someone who's waited for the job a long time and eventually got it never rose to the occasion and became a disappointment. I mean, the most recent example of that is really Anthony Eden. People forget that when Anthony Eden took over as the Conservative Prime Minister after Churchill in '55, he had been in Churchill's shadow waiting to take over for over 10 years. And remember, Eden had resigned over Munich. Eden had been on the right side over appeasement. He had resigned over it. And he was handsome and articulate and dressed magnificently. The women loved him, and he had this track record in foreign affairs. Well, and he was in Churchill's shadow for year after year. They couldn't get Churchill out. Eventually he goes, I think in '54. Eden does the honourable thing and calls an election when he takes over. Gets his own mandate in 1955. Within 14 months, he's a goner. Destroyed by Suez. Now, obviously something like Suez isn't probably going to destroy Brown. But it doesn't, sometimes if you wait too long, it just doesn't work out.